It's a wake-up call for people to pay attention, because organizations that actually build visions of the future for themselves actually play a part in that future. Organizations that don't are victims of the future that someone else creates for them.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Few Leadership Podcast with me, Boo. If you're enjoying the podcast and you forgot to last time, make sure you leave a review, like whatever platform it is that you're listening to this on. Fair enough, if you're in the car, don't worry. But yeah, eventually, please engage with the podcast in order for us to get phenomenal guests like today's guest, Nik Badminton, onto the show. Hey, Nik, mate. This has been awesome, man. I got to meet you a few months ago, maybe even a year ago, and have you on the show now. Man, I'm so excited. Thanks very much for taking the time to jump on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Boo. And what could go wrong? An Australian guy and a Brit, like now Canadian, on a podcast, right? It's
yeah,
like, we're a melting pot right here, you know.
Yeah, relocate. Maybe we can bring Canada and the US together.
Yeah, maybe, who knows? Who knows?
We can use that diplomatic finesse that the United Kingdom is so well known for. Hey, Nik, the future. I mean, gosh, you can read the news and the future looks bleak. And you look at the way in which leaders, the geopolitical level, are leading. Yeah, and you got to kind of wonder, how's the average leader in an organization meant to survive in today's world? Folks, Nik is a futurist. He's got some phenomenal insights, gets to engage with some incredible organizations from NASA to the UN to good old Uncle Walt. How on earth can we look into the future at the moment?
So I literally teach leaders and organizations how to look out like 5, 10, 20 plus years, to have that preparation, to ignite imagination, to build anticipation, and to deepen empathy. And then suddenly we're sort of shook back into like the reality of like, oh, everything changes today. Here's the irony, you know, all the people that talk about disruption and change and futures, it's all very inconvenient when something actually is truly, truly disruptive and immediate, right? And we know, like, I was just chatting to some people in the food and beverage industry in Chicago just last week, and they're like, well, we now have to get all of our coffee beans from Mexico because there's no tariffs on those beans. So our supply chain had to be rethought. All of our packaging was from China. Now all of that has to come from somewhere else. I think they were getting it from like Taiwan and other places now. And suddenly it's like, there's that. But the truth is, if you're just constantly fighting against, you know, the fires that happen every single day, that you don't have a view on that horizon, then you're going to be even more surprised when some of these, you know, larger, more impactful things, and there really are larger, more impactful things, you know, potentially coming, that are going to really, truly disrupt your business. So I try and get people to lift their heads up and to look out to these horizons and really wonder, you know, how they can shift their mindset from what is, the things that they have to deal with today, to what if the world changes? How am I going to react? How am I going to be prepared for the futures? And there can be multiple futures ahead of us that are going to unfold. And I'll be honest, Boo, 2025 is a busy, busy year. You know, lots of people are reaching out, lots of it last minute. Where are we going? A lot of people in manufacturing, a lot of people in electronics, a lot of people in a whole number of areas like energy. And they're like, you know, Nik, what's coming? Like, how can we be prepared? And really what we do is we sort of lift our heads up and we go, okay, let's find the signals of change. Let's think about the trends. Let's build some scenarios, and then let's tell stories about the futures in which we're going to have a significant impact as an organization and lead ourselves forward as a leader within that context.
You made that interesting comment, and so many people say it nowadays, last minute. Is the last minute just the minute of the day? It's just the moment now? I mean, is last minute just the way it is? And why I ask that question is whether there's just an enormous reframing of the concept of time and the concept of the future for leaders. I mean, I remember in the military and then through an initial career in humanitarian projects in the Middle East, and there was always this concept of the black swan event, right? Like a COVID and the black swan events were an aircraft accident or hijack or something, right? And the time between black swan events was pretty significant. Whereas today we seem to, frame what would be a black swan event every now and again into something that kind of is just part of life. So looking through the lens of change, transformation, and what is the difference between 5 years ago today and the future?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. At the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was talking about black swans, and the black swan is an unknown. It's something that we don't know, and we don't know that something is coming at us, right? So I actually think the biggest example of a black swan would be an alien invasion. It's so wildly out there. Something like a pandemic is actually not a black swan, it's a black elephant. Like the elephant that stands in the room, it's coming. You just don't know when it's coming.
I haven't heard of the black elephant before.
Yeah, it's a known unknown. Everything you've talked about is a known unknown. And this comes back to decision making. This comes back to running a business. And you're either running a business where you have a good understanding of where you are, the dynamics in your company, the dynamics in your industry, and those external factors that are influencing like market and demand and supply. And that's great. But the leaders that actually have got a view of the global mega trends, how technology is changing, how society is shifting, other things that are potentially coming, from climate, from other pandemics, from a number of other things, they're the leaders that can enact changes today, but with that superpower of really understanding the wider context of like, we make this decision today. We invest X $100 million in this particular shift. Is that future-proofed? Does that have a role? Are we just burning that cash? And it's interesting. Studies have actually found that organizations that build themselves up to have vigilance of what's coming, understanding of the signals and the trends and the scenarios, are actually more profitable. They've got higher rates of growth. They've got 200% market cap over other companies that don't do it. So it's interesting that we have to meld that superpower that is futures thinking with strategic planning and action on a daily basis.
I once heard someone refer to as the sunk cost of change, which is that often organizations are caught out by a change or a significant disruption in the market, whereas organizations that invest and understand that it's just part of business, that you need that fund, you need that ability to inject capital or cash flow into something that's unexpected. And that's actually where the opportunity comes in. Whereas back in the day, the time between that significant disruption and the impact it had was large. I was doing some research for a new book, and one of the things I'm really asking a lot of AI at the moment is to give me defined examples of how time has changed from Taylorism, 1911, principles of scientific management, all the way to what 2030 looks like. And when you look at the acceleration of speed and information consumption, what you start to see, it was some ridiculous, like 1.6 million more decisions per year the average organization needs to make compared to 100 years ago. Like 1.6 million decisions a year. I mean, that's insane. That must be such a horrific environment for future leaders to be under that sort of pressure.
This is complexity. I studied complexity, chaos theory. The narrative of things are moving faster than they ever have done before. I like to switch that and actually turn it on its head and say things are noisier than they've ever been before. And that's commensurate with what you're saying in terms of the amount of decisions that need to be made. So we might need to make a huge amount more decisions in a business every year. It's just because there's so much noise and we have to filter that out. And a lot of the decisions are around filtering these days. When you actually come down to the brass tacks of really working out what you need, cutting through the nonsense of understanding what's going to impact your business, a reality check in a way. the funnel of decisions gets down to those things that are really critical, really important, and actually matter in the world over the next sort of 20 plus years. And so I like to get people to reframe that. And, we're not going necessarily faster in a lot of aspects, just noisy and PR and internet and social media and all of these things. And if you think about it, and I do a little bit of social media on LinkedIn. That's it. There are some people that are out there. They're on LinkedIn, they're on TikTok, they're on X, they're on everything. Newsletters, all sorts of things. And why? Because they feel pressured to be part of that wave because someone's told them that it's going to be significant, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not denouncing that, these digital platforms can create influence, that they can create pressure. The most powerful business leaders in the world very carefully do the work. They very carefully, only say things that matter in certain contexts. And then they just get on focusing on the work at hand, right? I think a lot of organizations need to be like that as well.
Yeah, I think that with all of the noise, we create a lot more of a framework for excuses, is how
Absolutely. 100%.
That's how I see it,
Yeah. Do you know what? It absolutely. So I had this fascinating conversation with a banker recently, senior guy, really stoked about generative AI. And it's like, okay, cool. And he was saying, someone in his organization came to him and showed him the evolution of generative AI and the example that this guy used. And this is a big bank, big bank, was like a rainbow colored alpaca. And I'm like, excuse me? And throughout the conversation, he kept on calling it a llama. He kept apologizing, go back to calling it alpaca. Anyway, he's like, our AI guy showed us that over the last 18 months, the systems in place can now produce a hyper-realistic image of a rainbow-colored alpaca. And I was like, this is where we are. We're given these thin use cases, these slight examples of progress, and like humans, like we like magic, right? We like magic. We like to be wowed, and it's like whoa, it really is a rainbow colored llama, which is insane in its own thing, and it's hyper realistic, and that's all from a prompt. In the meantime, like within a bank, they should be talking about fraud, using it for fraud and whatever, and this is that's an example of these, like these things that are sleight of hand and things that are distracting us away from the work that, this guy was incredibly excited about AI, and that's cool. But like the use cases, I spend every day looking for use cases. I look at academic research and, I sit down and when I give my keynotes, there's a reality check. Yeah, it might be great in 5 years' time. It might be able to do the things that they promised today, or some of it. Today, don't believe the people that are trying to sell you on things like this, because they're just trying to raise money in the market or to create a reaction, right? And this is it. You're exactly right. Between the noise and between that distraction, between everything, now it's even more difficult to become a leader. My partner's a CEO. And do you know what she does, like in terms of paying attention to all of this? She pays attention to the people that have got smart, sensible ideas around use cases that provide value, and everything else is completely filtered out. Right? And we need more of that.
That's I think the one of the really core abilities of a great leader is to understand the difference between the perception of change and the reality of change, because it feels like there's a lot going on. It feels like everything's absolutely chaotic. But at the same time, like one of our clients is Amazon, and talking to Amazon about tariffs and all the craziness that's going on, and really day to day, they're like, well, it costs what it costs. We sell it for what we sell it for, and people buy it or they don't. Like we just build a system to adapt for it, and we have a diversified supply chain. That means if someone wants a programmable light bulb, well, they've got multiple sources where some people are sourcing them in Vietnam, others in Thailand, some in China. So, I think that what leaders really need to try and do, you said the word filter. And to me, I see the filter as a plan, or you can't have a filter without an idea of the future, right?
Exactly.
Or the future that you desire. You're not necessarily going to get, and you might have to change filters.
Yeah, absolutely.
But do you get a sense that organizations and leaders are moving away from planning and moving away from creating the filters because of the chaos, that they're just surrendering to the knee-jerk decision?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, there's still an immediacy of, say, if you're in retail, you've got to fix something up. I mean, right now, if your Christmas strategy and supply chain and order your inventory that you're going to order isn't in the books right now, your Christmas is done. The rest of your year is done, right? So people are taking care of business, but then people are they really are still trying to pay attention to what comes next. I mean, or they certainly want to, right? They really, really want to. And judging by how busy my business is, and I've been doing this about 15 years, and you sort of see this go through all sorts of crises and pandemics and recessions and whatever. Every point where there's critical decisions to be made, my business gets busier.
Yeah.
Right. And it's good, and it's a wake up call for people to pay attention, but actually to have, and I talk about hope. Have the hope that they can look beyond the boundaries of the problem that we have and the solutions we have to create today to something that's got a bit more resiliency and sustainability in the long run. Because organizations that actually build visions of the future for themselves actually play a part in that future. Organizations that don't are victims of the future that someone else creates for them, right? And we've seen this multiple times. The dawn of the internet is like Amazon and retail, every part of retail, right? They're going after healthcare and a number of other things right now. You're looking at things like Blockbuster didn't believe the internet and streaming was going to disrupt the movie rental business. Kodak didn't think that the digital camera was going to disrupt, the film processing, supply chain, right? People like Toyota right now are being very short-sighted in thinking that fully electric vehicles, are going to be the future of, normal consumer transportation. So we're seeing some modern examples of people that are just belligerent and stuck in their old ways. We've always done it this way, or we know best is the end of a business, or certainly the first steps towards the end of a business, right?
But I think that's where you see the glacial pace of real change. I mean, was it the Pulsar Leaf? Was that like the first EV, or in the Prius? I mean, it was the first hybrid, but that thing came out, I think, when I was at school nearly 30 years ago. And the reality around how slowly these megatrends actually take to adopt means that, do you perceive it means that there's actually a fairly decent amount of time for you to make a paradigm shift in your business model? So for Kodak, for example, it's not like on Friday someone says digital camera, and on Monday you're like, let's get rid of the film business. I mean, sure. It's about pacing out that evolution of your business, right?
Yeah, I mean, electric vehicle, like history lesson, like electric vehicles were kind of around at the beginning of commercial vehicles. Henry Ford's wife drove an electric vehicle. We're talking a long, long time ago. Solar panels. I tell this when I talk to the energy professionals. When was the first solar panel invented? 1857. When was the first solar array on a roof in New York City? About 1898. And everyone's like, what? It's like, it does take a long time. I open my keynotes with a story of a guy called Douglas Engelbart. And Douglas Engelbart is probably one of the greatest technologists that the world has forgotten. And he developed a system called the online system. 1968, he did a demonstration in San Francisco in December. I think it was December the 8th, to about 1,000 people. And he invented the mouse, hypertext linking, early forms of the internet, video conferencing, desktop publishing, documents that you could edit, and a number of other things. And that was 1968, and here we are in 2025. And a lot of those things, whilst they've advanced and they've been refined a little bit, we're still on a slow crawl forward of innovation across all of them as well, right? And so it does. I think you're right. It is glacial pace, but hey, everyone wants quicker change. Everyone's quicker change, and this is why. All the hype that's happening and moving from hype to hope is really a message that I really try and instill in people, is like to hope for incremental changes on a yearly basis to something that's a difficult problem that we're trying to solve. And we really do grind forward through the decades is kind of the future that we're headed towards. And that grind, that stamina, that's drive, and it's really challenging. The average age of a company in the S&P 500 is 18 years. Right?
It's crazy, right? Down from from 40. But I want to unpack hope a little bit, because I feel like hope is a double-edged sword. One of the refrains we often get from from leaders is we're going to do this and hopefully we'll get a result, and this will happen, and then hopefully we'll get some customers, and people investing in hope without the work, if that makes sense. And that hopefully we'll survive the pandemic. Hopefully the EV car thing goes away and we can keep making V8 guzzlers. So maybe unpack your version of hope a little bit.
Hope is not a strategy. There's lots of books, lots of people. I think Donald Rumsfeld came out, and I think Giuliani said it. Whatever. It's been politicized. It's interesting. So I'm actually writing a new book. So I call myself a hope engineer as much as I call myself a futurist. And it's someone that actively builds hope in an organization. And I say that hope is an energy for change. And hope is an energy for change that also enables us to hope for a better future. I actually don't mind it when organizations say that they have hope at their core and they are hopeful for better outcomes. Because if you look at modern theories of hope, and you go back to models that Charles R. Schneider and whatever put together, modern theories of hope state this: you set yourself with big, audacious goals. We've heard that before. We set pathways forward of where we're going and how we can enact that change and build hope into what we do. And that hope is incremental change, efficiency, reduction in cost, whatever. And to give agency to the people in our organization, our partners, and also the consumers to make that happen. And what I'm doing in my book, it's going to be called the Hope Engineers Playbook, is that I'm mixing futures work with hope. And it's never really been done before. And what you do is you build pictures of that hopeful future, and then you set the ground rules, and then you actually teach your organization to be hopeful, to make hopeful statements within their project charters and within their programs, to actually hold each other accountable towards like beneficial, hopeful actions for the benefit of the world and the people in it, right? And I think that is incredibly powerful. And every time I've spoken to people about it, and this is why I'm writing the book, they're like, this is such a critical idea for modern leadership. And I think that it cuts through a lot of the noise. I think it cuts through a lot of the BS that's being spoken about change out there, right? And actually putting hope and as an energy for change is about giving agency. It's about setting a goal and the pathway forward and to get everyone on board. And I think that's a new power in business. And I think that it's going to be incredibly fundamental for positive change on a number of fronts going forward.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask of you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show. It's interesting when you start using words like hope, and in a way, it is a little bit like vision, mission, goals, values, in that the vision needs to be something that instills a sense of agency and inspiration. Or are you saying hope is completely different to that? Because what are the you've been on the speaking circuit for a long time, you've met a lot of corporates. I have a personal opinion, which was just my opinion. I've done zero empirical research on this, but corporations struggle to navigate between words like hope, love, vulnerability, and vision, mission, goals, and KPIs, and that they end up in this awkward middle ground of neither. So how does the world of hope blend with a hope of vision, mission, goals, values, KPIs, OKRs?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back down to the fundamentals, and hope is a very simple concept of imagining something that's a better situation from which we stand in today, right? And I think that's where it gets a little bit more consumable than talking about vulnerability and love and a number of other things. In fact, we know tons of speakers that talk about love and vulnerability and how difficult it is to even like drum that into people. And to even have a conversation.
People can't even do it in their personal lives, let alone in business.
Yeah. I mean, I had a chat to a group of CEOs and sort of the guy that was in charge of all of them, I think he was the chairman, came over and he was like, he spoke about love and how we should love our employees and in a much more deep and fundamental level than just like, you're doing a great job. And and he goes, I feel shook. And it's because people don't talk about this.
Yeah.
Because we're sort of locked into this like bravado of like everything's okay. I'm a strong leader. I mean, how many CEOs do you see cry in really hard times? I mean,
Not in public anyway, I'm sure.
well,
It's in a quiet moment.
no, like, you know, I bawled my eyes out every Friday during the pandemic because you give all your energy away to a camera and your audience with nothing coming back. You're like bereft at the end of the week. It was interesting.
Yeah, it was tough times. Nope.
And
Times.
I was like often, you know, but it's like, you know, that depth of feeling and empathy and compassion and all that. You know, what I'm talking about with hope and futures and whatever is systematized in sort of strategies and ways to apply it. But like the wider thing is that depth of, you know, how your subconscious and your conscious works in a modern context in a way that really, really cares about what comes next versus doing just enough to appease the regulators and to have a cheery quarterly results for the shareholders, right?
What does the future hold for us in terms of our ability to engage at a human level and to pay attention? I mean, I'm fascinated with Johan Hari's book Stolen Focus at the moment. And that to me seems like a potential human crisis. I was reading a statistic the other day that 69% of people under the age of 23 prefer their virtual personality rather than themselves. And that to me seems like a trend that's only going to go one way, which is more detachment from reality and more engagement in the virtual space. What's your kind of forecast of the human condition, given some of those challenges?
So the reality of that particular statement is that it is their personality and it's their offline personality, and we need to work about integrating both of them. Is the internet and digital personas. There's a digital persona of mine that's on LinkedIn right now that people are interacting with, and with no knowledge. It's just not active. It's just listening, right? It's called digiphrenia, and I think Douglas Rushkoff actually came up with that phrase. He's a great author and thinker about digital culture and communications. The biggest crisis, and I don't talk about this enough in my keynotes because it cuts very, very, very deep. The biggest mega trend and crisis that we have in the world is multi-generational trauma. The memories and the traumas of our parents and their parents and their parents ad infinitum, you know, we carry them in our genes. It's epigenetic theory, the idea that there's an expression of the gene that comes from your environment. You can reprogram your gene to, you know, and this is where hope comes in a little bit, to sort of transcend and go beyond sort of the abuse that maybe your parents had or their parents or even you had, right? And that subconscious part of our world actually needs more attention than the actual conscious part. This conscious part that we're doing right now, we process about 40 bits of information per second like this, but our subconsciousness is actually processing 40 million bits of information per second. Right, it knows the temperature in the room. It knows the position.
It's phenomenal.
Where might be, whatever. Like, you know, out into the world, it's thinking about 15 other.
Just for me, because this is a personal area of fascination for me. What about the unconscious though? So we've got unconscious, subconscious, conscious. So when you talk subconscious, are you blending the two? You're talking about the unconscious, subconscious processes.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't talk about unconscious, because you're either conscious or you're not. Or you're either not conscious to what's going on around you, or you are conscious. But really, I think that there is just the delineation of conscious and subconscious. Subconscious is just the processing of everything, you know, through our senses.
But isn't unconscious our biases? Our subconscious is our beliefs, and our conscious is our expression through behavior. Is there like you're talking about, like a genetic program? So if you look at the 200 odd cognitive biases that we all have,
sure,
which are framed in cognition, but where's the origin? Where's the origin of the cognition? I mean, there has to be some layer of, I mean, if we have a genetic program around trauma that forms, which can't be subconscious if it's like literally a genetic program, then we layer into subconscious, and then
it is subconscious.
Rest it as conscious behaviors.
No, so it's really interesting. So there's something called epigenetics. This guy called Bruce Lipton. Go and read what Bruce Lipton's put out there. Go and look at the things that are out there talking about epigenetics and the encoding of information, and how subconscious experiences, unbeknownst to ourselves and hidden from ourselves through trauma and whatever, are actually affecting our expression in the world. You know, whether we drink too much, whether we smoke, whether we, do a number of other things. They're all learned behaviors that actually manifest via the subconscious into prompts that come out in the real world. I actually think that the unconscious and subconscious should really be lumped in together. And if you were to call something the unconscious, it's kind of a bridge between the subconscious and the conscious world as well. We're getting into pretty deep stuff here, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting, like if you read like a proof of life and you unpack people who are literally unconscious, like asleep or in a coma.
Yeah. So, okay. Personal story. When I was 8 years old, my sister was killed in a car crash, and I spent about 32 of my years not talking about it, not processing it, not having any effect on my life. Right. I was a very productive, very high achieving person with massive amounts of anxiety, probably elements of
those generally go together. That's generally the pair.
Yeah, elements of substance abuse, elements of neediness and relationship misfunction in a way. A whole bunch of divorces happening and a whole bunch of stuff. I've only had one divorce, but like that. And at the age of 40, I was in a counselling session, and we were talking about my family for the first time. It took 5 years to get there, right? And my counsellor was like, "That's it. Your sister passing away was a deeply traumatic moment that's probably got a chain reaction on everything that we're seeing manifest itself and challenging." And, I was a high-flying ad exec and everything was fine and rock and roll. We did something called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And what that does is it's tapping therapy, and people might know it. You might know it. Sometimes,
it's a fairly well-known PTSD treatment, right?
Indeed, PTSD. They still don't know exactly how it works, but they just know that it does work. Anyway, tapping therapy. I had 4 sessions, and we went through and we walked through the pathways of my memory from a subconscious perspective. You let your mind wander, and you suddenly find all of these things over time, and you reframe the trauma from the anxiety and the trauma that you hold to the idea that you can do anything. Like anything is possible, unlimited capability, right? And I remember walking out after the fourth or fifth session, and the entire world looked different. And the last 15 years, like 12, 13 years, has just been like an upwards trajectory in my life. I thought I was doing well before. Is nothing compared to what happened the last 10 to 12 years or so. And then over time, I've actually done a number of subconscious therapies like Psych K, a number of other things. Some people use psychedelics to go deeper into that and whatever. And it unlocks all of this human capability. And what it really is unlocking is the ability to tap into the wild amounts of information with subconscious. And what's really interesting about the current narratives around artificial intelligence, so bringing it back into tech, is that we're going to have so much data that we're going to have a fundamental nervous system, which is the infrastructure of information capture and sensors. The storage of data and the actual processing of data using AI is actually going to be a conscious business capability tapping into the subconscious level of how the world is truly working.
Well, this is the journey to the singularity event, right? We're actually starting to see starting to see some of the, particularly with the AI's ability to process information. I mean, that's what a human kind of does, right? We observe, we process it, we put all that trauma and all those biases and our journey so far, and we come up with the decision. And for the first time in human history, it seems, other than a shaman or a witch doctor, something is coming up with insights that is challenging our own speed at which we create insight ourselves. So maybe that's something to talk about in terms of leadership. I mean,
that's right.
2045. I love the singularity theory. It's great. But what about the humility that a leader needs to bring now in terms of how smart am I? Look how insightful I am. Because I know leaders that push back and deliberately do not want to engage with technology,
right,
because they feel it brings them down. It feels that it gives them too much noise. So I guess we started this, but we went down a massive rabbit hole. But when we talk about human and technology playing nicely in the future, what are some of the ways in which a leader needs to show up to make sure that they're not being run by technology, but also that they're not missing the boat? I mean, it's a real balancing act, right?
Yeah. One of the greatest CEOs I ever worked with did not have email or a computer. She had occasional emails printed out for her by her assistant, things that she needed to pay attention to. She ran a vacation company, a holiday company. and for a very large brand in the UK. And she'd come from the ground level of running experiences for people, the human connection, and she knew instinctively how to run a vacation company. She didn't need to know how, an e-commerce system worked, or, aircraft booking like systems like Sabre worked, or anything like that. She didn't need to be distracted by, emails and updates and meeting requests and whatever. She had someone that told her where she needed to be, and what she needed to pay attention to. And she had briefings and a number of things. And I kind of like that as a way of operating, right? How many CEOs today are still like in the spare room at home at like 10 o'clock at night trying to get through the sways of emails that they've been CC'd on, right? We've created this, this deluge of information that we feel is really important, right? And also we've coupled that with something where we don't empower people. We don't give them agency to make decisions themselves. It's absolutely insane to me that.
Well, that's the problem with technology, right? Because it can give you a measurement anywhere in the company, and
but that, we don't always measure the things that really count, right?
No, that's right. It's completely reactive. It's that difference between being aware and being informed. They're two totally different things. If you have information with the context, then it's actually insightful, right? But if you just have the information itself. And I think this is where you see in these quarterly reporting cycles and this construct,
right?
And it's just a construct, right? It's a human construct,
right.
Financial reporting. And the pressure it puts on that short-term decision-making where decisions are made based on noise, right? Just that overwhelming sense of information rather than the conversion of that into wisdom. But where is technology a force for good? So that's one example. I want printed out emails, and that might have worked at the speed of business at a certain point in the evolution of the corporate ecosystem. But what do you feel is in the longer term, the balance for a leader in what value are they looking for in technology? What do they need to be aware of in order to lead effectively?
Again, I mean, it sort of comes down to this, Boo. I think people need to work out what's going to be an important indicator of change, and that's going to allow them to prepare. And, there's lots of nuanced like metrics and KPIs and OKRs and all sorts of things, but it still fundamentally boils down to very few metrics that matter in an organization. Again, if you're working in a regulated market and you're a public company, even if you're a private company, there are still things that you live and die by in terms of like profit and growth and loss and the such.
That's the game. That's like soccer.
That's the game, but I still think it's fundamental, right? Any leader, CEO or otherwise, needs to qualify whether technology really gives them an edge over a standard mode. And I think just
a rainbow-colored llama. Yeah.
The standard mode is I go to work, I sit in a room with people, and I have a conversation about things. And those things like we deal with business. Now, how can technology enable me to have better conversations? Well, there's research, there's being able to dig deeper, there's being able to get more erudite insights, then there's teams and whatever. The bottom line is someone's prepared a 1 page or a half page that matters for you, right? So technology that enables the teams that support you to basically whittle down the information to 1 or 2 things that like matter in a meeting, right? That is where executives need to be paying attention to. The reduction of noise down to something useful. Years ago, I worked with a large technology company. I worked with Dell. And I ran a 50-person team. I used to build large data warehouse infrastructure. I'm actually a technical architect by trade. And I studied AI back in the 90s as well. So I've been at this game a long time.
That's another thing. AI has been around a lot longer than people.
Yeah, 1956 was the first mention of the term Carnegie Mellon, and on and on and on. But like here we are, we're at a point where like it's more like consumer level, AI, right? I was building a system, like 50 people. We built 14 data warehouses across Europe. And we gathered all the data and all of the management and everyone. We need all the data, bring all the data in. It took us 6 months to initially process everything. And, this was the year 2006, 2007. And it took us 6 months to process information, to get it into a single place, to tell us that 2 things influenced a buying decision, right? Which was like what you bought, when you bought, actually 3 things: what you bought, when you bought it, and how much you spent. We plugged that into a very human idea around life cycle marketing, and we put like $10 million on the bottom line every quarter. That's it. And it's a good example of what a reductionist approach to all of the noise and all of the data, down to things that really matter, to an actual action that leads to a business outcome that it is desired, really takes. And the story today, I think, is still exactly the same. And it's like, you know, hey, there's been 10,000 emails in the organization this year, and I just want to know what our profit is this month. You know, and that's it.
Isn't it that we build and interpret technology in the framework in which we work? So we build a technology version of a human, right? So how a human views data, what a human feels is important. But when we embrace pure machine learning and pure technology, is there an opportunity to access insights and actionable data for a leader to make some really profound decisions? So I'm trying to frame that up in a way that...
Absolutely. But you've still got a person that's run a team of humans that's run the work to deliver that, and to add narrative to it, and to add meaning to that, and to put it in the context of the business to then deliver it to you. It's like,
I'll give you an example. So this is an example just like 48 hours ago. Like, so working with AI and being constantly told it's what you prompt, and to give it direction and
sure,
and to have it work for you. And I've been doing it. And literally yesterday, I just said to it, I just want to smash this business and be the biggest leader development company in the world. What do I do?
Yeah.
And give me every ounce of detail.
Right.
And honestly, the strategy that it came up with, the level of insight that I got from that was more profound than any marketing company. It was fully referenced. It was incredible. But where's that balance between just throw it to the machine versus the detail around the prompting? I'm kind of getting into the 5%, 4% conversation of leadership now, because I just feel like there's some opportunity there.
And yeah, I agree. So this is what you should do in that situation. It's like, wow, it's showing me all this amazing thing. Now, generative AI is a mirror. It's a mirror and reflection of everything that's come before it, or some combination of such, right? Other people's ideas, other people's reference points and opinions. They may not all be correct, and the system may actually make up a bunch of stuff. And some of that made up stuff might seem really sensible. What's really interesting is it's a mirror. What's more profound than what it delivers is what you find that it hasn't found. And that's where your hard work needs to begin. And that's where the difference is going to be. So I'm writing this book on hope and futurist theory. There is nothing out there that talks about it in any way, sense or level. There's this great futurist called Sohai Ayatollah, and he's an amazing guy, came up with causal layer analysis, like really, really fundamental. And it's like, who talks about hope in their work? And they're like, Sohail. And I keep going, and I've gone through all of his public. He doesn't talk about it anywhere, specifically the way that I want to talk about. But like, you know, these systems are still like, this guy does exactly what you're looking for, because it's trying to, like, you know, satisfy the prompts that we give it as well. It's kind of nefarious in a way, right? So I like to think that all these Gen AI systems give you 20%. They can qualify something. They can get you out of a bind in terms of you know, you're stuck thinking about like some insights or strategy going forward, but they're not the answer. I mean, I threw a renovation quote. I'm renovating a house at the moment. For a renovation quote, just to quickly add up like 10 lines of you know, quite complex you know, cost information into ChatGPT, and I used the 4.0 model, and it got it wrong. We're still at this point of like, you know, and whilst it can seem amazing, these systems have been these systems have been built to present information in a way that makes you go, whoa, this is absolutely amazing, without truly giving you the rationale of how it put it together. and the white box. We need a white box solution to AI that actually tells you how it came to deliver what it wanted. It just gives you something that satisfies you enough so that you think that it's amazing, so that you keep paying your subscription for it. It's true. I mean, I notoriously got this reputation for being kind of down on AI a little bit, but that's because I know how it works and I know how it gets there. But like the biggest benefit, and any leader that listens to this podcast, is it's a mirror, and it's a mirror of something that fundamentally shows us what the world is and what people think and what the opinion is, and everything outside of that is where the advantage lies. Right? My partner showed me she goes, "Hey, someone's just passed me it was like principles for working with generative AI," and the first thing I said was like, "They just asked like ChatGPT or something to write this for you." It's just like, it was so poorly considered, and it's like, and that's
it's like dating. It's like asking someone about themselves, and all you're going to get is the best version of themselves.
It's like people that use ChatGPT as a therapist or whatever. It's like, yes, it's gonna be great, but like a really great therapist sees something outside of the mirror that you hold in your hand, right? It's pretty deep.
Right, that's great. That's great insight. Nik, just wrapping up, running out of time, but one of the questions we kind of ask as we get towards the end here is, with your knowledge of the future now and the insight that you have, if you transported yourself back to your mid-20s, what are 2 or 3 things you'd do differently that someone at that point in their life might be able to use to up their leader game?
I would have actually stopped messing around with the work that I was doing and doubled down on doing the futures work. Now, it's interesting, like 20 years ago, where was I? 20 years ago, I made a decision to shift away from being a hardcore technical architect, like tech builder, into business strategy. And it took a few years to get there. So all I do at that point in time is I'd actually add elements of futures thinking to that. And I would actually go completely independent and start speaking professionally sooner. Just because, the revolution that comes from like having the thought leadership developing and whatever. But I also think there's something about getting to a point and being being a leader that helps leaders through difficult situations, is that you kind of have to walk the path. You kind of have to make the mistakes.
You have to know what it feels like.
And you know what I tell myself 20 years ago? Get to the gym more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's great. That's great advice. That's a muscle that you need to train early on. Hey, Nik, thanks so much. Well, it's such an awesome opportunity and a personal indulgence to be able to spend an hour with you today. So I'm super grateful, and I hope we get to do it again, because there's some stuff that I really wanted to go further on, but given the time of the average commute, I wanted to get this done by the time someone got to work.
Yeah, so I just hope that plenty of people are distracted at their desks, basically looking up jobs of how to be a futurist in their organization.
Yeah. So just Google Nik, Nik, badminton, like racket and shuttle, and you're going to find a ton of phenomenal resources.
Yeah.
And don't forget, like the podcast, leave some notes, reach out to Nik if you've got any questions, mate. Thanks again for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Boo. Always a pleasure.